I see there's a few that are still connecting their sound, and that looks good. So welcome everyone to this strategic social media for your food or farm business. This is part of our feed webinar series. And I'm Patrick Nearing. I'm the community development professor and educator for Extension in Brown County and Kewaunee counties. And our speaker today is Kristen Runge, who's a community development specialist. She is a communication research specialist for Community Economic Development Program and serves as the principal investigator for the Economic Development Administration University Center. Kristen is a communication researcher interested in strategic communication, public opinion, social media, and she serves as the principal investigator for the Economic Development Administration University Center at UW-Madison, where she focuses on issues at the intersection of the economy and the environment. Today's webinar is for food entrepreneurs and food-based businesses. It's brought to you by the Feed Initiative, which is a food entrepreneur ecosystem development initiative at UW-Madison Extension Community Food Systems Program. And we're a statewide extension program that fosters equitability, resilient and sustainable community food system development through research, evaluation, project-based partnerships, and programming, such as this one. In the fall, we'll also have a 2-day summit on food and farming businesses. And save the date for that fall summit, which will be in October on the 28th and 29th. In Milwaukee. And I'd like to make a quick plug to complete our short session survey at the end. It helps us to keep programs like this low cost and improve future programming. And please see the link in the chat, which will be there shortly or at the end of the program. And lastly, encourage interaction with our participants, especially during the Q&A session, but you can interact with us as we go along. And feel free to put your questions in the chat box at any time or save them for the breaks that will be taking place throughout the presentation. And now I'll turn it over to Kristen Runge to share information about today's topic.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate the invitation to be here to present. And thank you, Jessica, Lauren, and James for inviting me to be here today. A little bit about myself. While I am introducing myself, if you have the ability and you're so inclined, why don't you put a little bit about yourself in the chat? If you are a CSA owner or employee, or if you have a food truck or you run a farm or whatever it is that is bringing you here today, I'd love to know about that so that as I'm going through the presentation, I can answer in ways that are relevant to everyone that's on the seminar. Also, I just put in the chat my email address. I put it there in case you need to get a hold of me while I'm not paying attention to email right now. Obviously, if you've got questions after the seminar, please do feel free to reach out to me. So a little bit about myself. As Patrick said, I'm a community economic development specialist. My primary focus is on communication research, and I look at public opinion and how mass media and social media and newspaper use affects our opinions on issues at the intersection of the economy and the environment. And by default, that involves looking at a lot of issues around food and farming and agriculture and how we provide food for ourselves as communities and as a nation, and how we process food and how new technologies around food are either accepted or rejected among people out in our neighborhoods and in our state and in our world. What brings me here today is that I've done a couple of projects on social media and how social media can be used strategically by individual food entrepreneurs. So not necessarily the big global corporations or organizations. They've got their own experts in this. I try to work on behalf of people that are just starting out or who I have long done something in food or farming and are happy being their farm and their food business and not necessarily interested in in global food production. So that's what brings us here today. Couple of things. My computer every once in a while decides it doesn't like me to screen share. So hopefully we go through the entire presentation without a hitch, but if not, there may be a moment or two where those of us that are crafting the presentation today or crafting the seminar huddle and have somebody else share a screen. So I mentioned that because right now I'm going to do the trickiest thing that is going to happen today, and that is attempt to screen share. And are you guys seeing strategic media for excellent? All right. I'm a little bit nervous about it kicking me off, so I'm going to keep it in the non-presentation mode. So you're going to see on the side of the screen a little bit of my slides, which lets you know exactly how many slides we've got planned today. I promise to go through them relatively quickly. So let's talk strategic social media for food and farming. Personally, I find it to be an interesting topic. What we're going to focus on today is research that I did with Brett Shaw, who is a professor of life sciences communication at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Laura Witzling, who is a graduate student and now works in the private industry that focuses on food. And our research was sponsored by Sea Grant, NOAA through Sea Grant, SARE, Fair Share, and Eat Wisconsin Fish. So we're going to hear a little bit about fish farming today, and we're going to hear a little about CSAs, and then some background information about other topics that I've touched on over the years. Before we get into the what do you want to do, or what can you do, or how can you talk about your food business strategically on social media, I want to just go through what the social media landscape looks like lately. Pew Research Organization does consistent annual research on identifying who across the United States is using different social media platforms. And the next couple of slides are directly taken from their website. And I mention that because they remain a great resource that is free and easy to use. Just Google Pew Research, social media, and you'll get the latest information about what they're putting out there. And they're kind of the go-to for tracking how social media is being used by individuals. When we talk about why do you want to use social media, if you're my age, I'm in my 50s, you're my age, you grew up with radio, television, pre-cable television, not just television, but pre-cable television, where we had 3 networks plus PBS, and maybe WGNN if you lived in close enough to Chicago to pick that up. We had 3 television stations. You had your set of local radio, you had a local newspaper. That was pretty much it for our media universe. And everybody in our community probably subscribed to and read the newspaper, probably watched the 5 o'clock or the 5:30 local news, probably listened to the radio station all day long. We don't live in that media environment anymore. We have thousands of television channels, while most of us still listen to the local radio for some events, sports events, for kind of our local music scene, perhaps. We've really fractured our radio audience. Newspapers are still out there, and many of them are still going strong, but we know we've seen kind of a tail end of the newspaper industry as the dominant news leader. So how do we communicate with people? Social media. More people are using Facebook and YouTube nowadays and are reading their local newspaper or watching their local news. Now, they're not all doing it at that consistent, predictable time that we used to be able to get people to our local media channels, but they're using this consistently. 83% of all Americans, based on Pew Research, use YouTube at some point in time. 68% use Facebook at some times. Instagram tends to be used more often than some of the others, but Pinterest, TikTok, these are all great platforms to be on. If you're only going to choose one, though, it's not actually YouTube, because it's hard to get information to people on YouTube. It would be Facebook. If you're only going to use one, I would say use Facebook. You don't have to limit yourself to just one. Who uses each platform? It's a little bit different flavor and a little bit different audience for every platform. Facebook, for example, is used relatively widely by people of all ages, but a lot of the consistent users on Facebook are middle age or a little bit older. So think of Gen X, some millennials as they get a little bit older, baby boomers for sure, greatest generation, a little bit less often than some of the other generations, just because they're not on technology as much. Children come onto Facebook in their teen years, they use it for a while, they get to high school, they get to college, they're maybe not as keen on mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles knowing kind of what's going on. So they drift off to some of the other platforms, and then they come back in their late 20s, their early 30s, as they're establishing households of their own. So it is kind of a life stage that we're seeing. Facebook has been around enough that we're seeing that now. They're on Instagram pretty consistently, Snapchat, TikTok, far more than other generations. One of the things that I love about the Pew Research data is that they give you this very convenient grid. So if you know who your target customer is, let's say it's women ages 50 to 64 or 30 to 49, you can look on this grid and you can see exactly what platforms they're using most often. So if we were targeting women ages 30 to 49 or men ages 30 to 49, we're probably looking at a combination of Facebook and Instagram. Got this really handy chart. It does a lot of the market research that we used to have to do on our own for us. And that's just, again, one of the things that you can get by going to the pewresearchgroup.org website and searching social media. They update this relatively frequently. This is from a survey they did May through September of 2023. So they're probably going to launch their next survey this summer, early fall, and update it again next year about this time. So that's why social media, simply put, a lot of people are on it. It's a more reliable way to target people than our newspapers, radio, television. It also ends up being significantly less costly than some of our traditional media channels. Now, that said, what we're going to talk about today isn't how to put an ad on Facebook. It isn't how to launch an ad on Instagram. There are great tutorials on YouTube on how to do that. There are some amazing people who have done this for a living for years and share their information freely. Instead of doing that, because you can get that somewhere else, I want to talk about the Wisconsin-specific farming and CSA research that we have and talk about what you might want to say about your organization or how what people are looking for to know about your food business or about you as a food entrepreneur or a farmer or somebody who's in this world. That's really what we'll focus on today. So first, before that, though, let's talk a little bit about some best practices. Best practices for posts. First thing you're going to notice is there are pictures on this page, and these are not food businesses. This is true. I picked these pictures because they're great examples of what all posts across all fields should look like if you have a business that you're engaging the public in. These pictures are gorgeous. They're bright. They're easy to see. If you look on the one on the right where it's a themed picture, all four of those pictures are the same theme. The owner of this business has a consistent message in each one of these, and it's a very short message that she's using. Best practices, if you're going to be on social media, if you can be consistent, if you're a once a week poster or a twice a week poster, try to always make sure you're posting once a week on the same or around the same day, or twice a week on or around the same day. Think of it as you're a small television show, even though you're not maybe posting video, but you want to be predictable to your audience. So maybe you always have a Tuesday post that is in advance of a food event that maybe is happening on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. You know, it's Tuesday. We're starting to think about, going to, Waunakee, Wisconsin later this week for their farmers market. Just consistent posts really help build an audience and help your audience understand when they can expect to see you and hear communication from you. Second, predictable. Again, that consistent schedule really helps. Simple, we don't need to be really elaborate. Make sure it's goal driven, that you know why you're posting. Is it that you're posting to drive people to your website? Is that your goal? Is it your goal that you are trying to build an audience for your Facebook page or build an audience for your Instagram feeds? Or you're trying to get people to like your page and not necessarily driving through to a website? Is the goal that you want to sell CSA memberships and it's the time of year where people need to sign up? What is the goal in mind? Make sure all of the images and the words support that single goal that you have. And then also, what are your overarching goals for your business? Do you have more than just a tactical in the moment goal that you want? Do you want people to associate your business over the long term with your region, with local foods, with a particular type of food that you grow or process or sell? So how are you serving that overarching goal in your communication? Research-based, I'm going to give you some of that. Visual, we know that people click on posts that have pictures. We know within pictures, and I've got a bad example of this up here, but we know that within pictures, if there is a face or a person, People are going to click on that more often than, or engage with that more often than they are with the post that does not have a person. That is just something we think inherently happens. We as humans are attracted to other human faces, and we've evolved to be attuned to and pay attention to that. So visual. And then third, or seventh, I guess, is short on text. Make your text short and to the point and easy to read. We're looking at this right now on a big computer screen, but for the most part, people, of course, are using their phones and scrolling on their phone. So that short text means that you're likely to have all of the information on the text or on the post as they see it on their phone in their hand. So keep in mind that that mobile phone is really your canvas. All right, I just put a whole bunch of information out there, and I do not know if anyone has a question. Does anyone have any questions? Right now, I just data dumped and gave you guys like a ton of things to think about. I'll let you digest for a second before we move on. When I'm looking in the chat, I see apple farming, fritter rescue, chili sauce manufacturer.
If you do have a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can send it to me or Jessica, Jane Spade in the chat. And we could announce it anonymously, or you can unmute yourself and give us your question.
I have a question, if I can be heard.
Thanks,
sure.
Vincent.
Okay. It's more of a, well, you mentioned that there are really great tutorials on YouTube. I'm a novice completely with social media. And I appreciate the information you're putting here. If at some point you could maybe mention or type out some of those people that do put on good tutorials as well, that would be helpful for me to research later.
I will definitely do that. I might send that out after. Do we have everyone's emails, Jessica? We do. Let me put a couple suggestions together and send those out afterwards.
Thank you.
First place I go, because every time I do an experiment on, and I'm going to talk about a couple of the experiments we've done. Every time I do an experiment on Facebook, enough time has passed, even if it's only been a couple of months, and there have been enough advances in the way that Facebook or Instagram run things that I don't have to go back to square one, but I have to make sure that I know exactly what the platform is doing. So the first place that I start when I'm doing this is I go to the Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, websites, platforms, and I go through their own published tutorials. I think that's a good starting place. And then on top of that, there are some really great social media gurus. Do we call them gurus anymore? Is that like a 1990s or early 2000s term, maybe? I might be dating myself. We've got some really great people that kind of publish their information for free, that after I've done the Facebook, then I go to these folks and I learn a little bit more about what they're doing. So yeah. What's the current protocol for tagging brands in your posts? I find, honestly, that it's a little bit community specific. So I personally think that we should always be tagging ourselves in posts and tagging our brands in posts. If it's your own post, it's a little bit more acceptable. There are some communities where tagging yourself on somebody else's post is a faux pas. So I think the best I always tag myself in my posts or posts that I'm putting out there. If you are working with somebody else, if you have a group, and this is a great early piece of advice, this should probably be on my best practices. If you have a group of people that you are co-marketing with, so let's say you're part of a CSA collective, or let's say you've got a community of people in Wisconsin or in your region that you kind of work together and you promote each other's businesses. If you outline kind of what are your internal rules for taking each other, that is a great way to make sure that you are cross-promoting. Working as a group with your business is one of the easiest and best ways to both build a community of practitioners for you yourself, a community of entrepreneurs, but also to just raise the profile of your local food scene or your regional food scene. And we can talk about, bring me back to that at the end of the seminar, if you don't mind, community building. I'll forget it. I'll talk about other things. Any other questions before we go on? No? All right, then let's talk about the first set of research findings that I'll present. First thing before we get into the research findings, Laura Witzling and Brett Shaw did a really great survey of Wisconsinites and asked them in this survey, among all of the many other things that this survey covered, and we'll send out the links to some of these reports that I'm referencing right now, and a PowerPoint with the actual reports linked in the slides. They asked, what does local mean? Because local is this ambiguous, abstract term. And there's, the local foods movement and the idea of marketing our food and our place together are really, I think, critical components of how we talk about who we are as food entrepreneurs. Local means a lot of different things. 86% of the people said local meant Wisconsin, so from within the state. 82% said local also means, or could also mean, it's an adjacent complementary definition, my town, my village, my city. 80% said my county, so Door County, Vilas County, Shawano County, my county, and 75% of the people said within 50 miles or a 1-hour drive of where you are. So when you're asking a local customer what local means, these are all the different identities they associate with it. And the kind of the contexts in which we can say this is a local food. So that idea of it coming from Wisconsin is probably the biggest catchment area that we'd say for local, even though our definition of local might be a little bit different, depending on kind of how we define as food producers and people in this world do. So based on that, one of the things we wanted to do is understand, how do we promote local foods? And so we took this and along with some of the other information in the report that I'm going to drop a link into at our next break, the research said that there are really kind of 3 possible messages that we might be able to use that would attract attention or generate information or interest in local foods. And the first message that people said they were really interested in local foods because they perceive that local foods help local farmers. I said that's probably a pretty accurate perception, right? Second, they perceive that local foods are more fresh, they're more tasty. Again, I'd say that's probably a pretty accurate perception. And then third, local foods support local jobs. So all of these things really ring true to what we know about local foods, but also how people perceive. So the question becomes, from a research perspective, if we are using these messages on social media in a strategic way, are some of these messages more successful than others? And that's what we really wanted to find out. And so we ran an experiment. That's what we do. We did a message fielding test or field test where we asked 4 CSA farms across Wisconsin, got 4 different corners of Wisconsin, if they would allow us to take over their Facebook page for a 2-week period of time. We would spend $400 each on advertising, testing 4 separate messages. And the goal was that the most successful message of the 4 would be the one that had the lowest cost to click through from Facebook to their farm website. That's counterintuitive, right? The more that's successful that a Facebook advertisement is, the more often it runs. The more often it runs, the lower the cost it is. So Facebook wants high volume ads that are clicked on a lot of times. And in order to incentivize that, you pay, the more your ad runs, the less you pay for each click. Now, if you're familiar with Facebook advertising, you're aware that sometimes it's a penny or half a penny or 2 pennies for big national ads to get click-throughs. Our prices weren't quite that low, but they were still pretty good at the end of it. So the technical definition of local, Vincent, what is the technical definition of local? Jessica, Lauren, James, do you guys have a technical definition of local? I think it's that, for me, it's that ambiguous. It could be, it's defined in a lot of different ways. I don't know if the same is true in the actual food community versus those of us that just talk about the food community. And I see, Jessica, you're shaking your head. There's not a single definition.
I think you'll find in the food community, there's multiple definitions, and it varies by person to person as much as it does from business to business.
Excellent. I got 150 miles is one definition in Wisconsin. All right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And Jennifer says, yep, that's it. All right. So what we say and what our consumers say our consumers are a little bit more ambiguous, let's put it that way, than what we would define as actually local. So here's what our ads look like. So for each one of these 4 CSAs, the ad was identical except for the name of the farm. So Pensacola Valley Certified Organic was one of our participants. Get fresh produce picked at the peak of its flavor all season long when you become a member of Pensacola Valley Certified Organic Farm CSA. Fresh and tasty produce all season long. Fresh tastes better. Again, we're just really trying to make sure that if you glance at this message for a millisecond or a half of a second, that fresh and tasty is visually communicated and verbally communicated with words. So first one. Second one, Wisconsin grown. So again, here the definition of local is within Wisconsin. Get a season full of produce grown locally right here in Wisconsin. Graphics don't change, words don't change. Only thing that's changing again is the name of the CSA. Oops. Next one. Here, third one is we were trying to emphasize the community aspect of CSA. So join your community, join your neighbors in supporting local foods. This one wasn't necessarily explicitly called out in the research, but we felt that there is a strong kind of, I don't want to, what's the word I want to use? An in-group feeling to it, like support your local, like it's important beyond the food. It's important that we buy local across all things, support your community. These are your people. These are your local farmers. So again, social norms, kind of in everybody's doing it. So why don't you? In a positive way though. Last one was personifying farmers. So from our farm to your table, support name of the CSA, Pensacola Valley Certified Organic Farm, your local family farm. So growing food for our community, again, a little bit of a nod to the idea of local being us, being you, the consumer, and the farmer, and us, the farmers. So farmer personified. So these are our 4 ads. If you can, put it in the chat which one you think is the one that was the winner in terms of most clicks and lowest cost. Now we should have some Jeopardy music playing for like 5 or 10 seconds. Yeah. See if anybody takes this up. Our farm to your table. We've got top left, fresh tastes better. First, fresh tastes better. Our farm, state of Wisconsin. All right. I like it. Wisconsin grown. Wisconsin grown. I love it. I predicted, and I was wrong. I absolutely predicted wrong. I thought it was going to be Wisconsin grown. I thought we've got the vegetables, we've got the appeal to local, we've got the cool barn style cutting board. That was not what happened. I would have lost whatever I bet, $5 probably. That's what my betting limit. Our farm to your table was the clear winner. Now the one that I thought came in second, so I don't feel too bad. Third was join your community, and fourth was fresh tastes better. And here we want to run into one of the paradoxes of communication research is we as consumers, all of us, even those of us who do this from a research standpoint, we're not necessarily always aware of why we choose what we choose. So when we ask people, why do you choose local foods? Inevitably, it tastes better, it's fresher, it supports local jobs. All of these things always come to the top. We think that those things are all true. We think what actually happens, though, is that when you're given a choice, when you're seeing messages from all of these different things, you've got an opportunity with a local food to connect to the people that are growing or producing or delivering your food. That's the part that switches you from logic, it tastes better, it supports job, to a little bit more of like a heart-to-heart connection with the food. If you ask me, we haven't done a lot of digging into why it works. To me, that feels like probably why it works. Like I now have a personal connection to the food that I'm eating and to the people that are growing the food that I eat. So that can feel really powerful. So what does this mean? What does this mean? Click-throughs. Now, this was quite a few years ago. We were new at running ads like this. These were organizations for the most part. A couple of the CSA farms that we work with had social media presences. We were advertising only to people who were outside of their network. So if you liked Pensacola Farm, if you liked Winterfell Acres, if you liked one of these farms, you were not seeing these ads. These were all new eyeballs for the most part. So the ads didn't hit the way they would have if this was an audience that had already been exposed to and participating and patronizing these farms. We were looking for click-throughs for new people to click through to their websites. So our ads weren't bad, 312 new clicks through to the website for the one that won the most. If we did this today, we would be much more experienced in it, and we would hope that we would have probably 10 times those numbers, or at least 4 or 5 times those numbers. Not bad for $400, because these are people who are actually during CSA sign-up season moving from the Facebook page to the website where they can actually sign up to be in the CSA. So it's consider it lead generation, pretty low cost lead generation. The 2 that win, Wisconsin Grown, like I said, was second. That was 98 cents per click through to the website. And the Our Farm to Your Table, 89 cents per click through. Again, if we were doing this again today, we would probably be able to drive those numbers down because we got a little bit better at it. And we look at what did all of these look like. So again, we just varied the picture. The text remained the same. So here are the 4 farms that participated. Of these 4, the one that got the most click-throughs was Pensackie Farm, and we think it was because there was the tractor. So we connect not just to the people, but also like, here's this iconic farm mall. My grandfather had a farm mall that my uncle now has and is restored. Every kid grew up in Wisconsin, at least, knowing somebody that had that particular tractor, or having the like toy version that you played with on the carpet of that tractor. So we think that there is a whole lot of like kind of nostalgia and farmer connection. What would we do differently today? A lot of different things. Mostly we've just gotten better at understanding, and Facebook's gotten better too, at understanding how to target. This ad, which I'll go over in a little bit, taught us a little bit about how and when to target. We wouldn't start with all 4 messages. Right now, we would just focus on the connection to the farmer. So just by virtue of having participated in this or having run this experiment, we've learned a lot about how to attract people to CSA pages. So I'll come back to a couple of the items there. Other questions before we go on and we talk about farmed fish. Do we have any fish farmers in the audience today? Maybe not. If you're a fish farmer, what I'm about to show you next, you'll have seen before. So no questions before we go on? All right. Also, what I do differently today, and we don't have an experiment on it right now, but I'd introduce some video into the advertising, and and not necessarily video in the advertising, but I do a little bit more short video with organic posts. And when I talk about organic posts, those are the posts that you're not paying for, just the regular posts that you're posting to keep up and build your community. I mean, video wasn't really accessible on Facebook back when we did this experiment, nor was it as popular. Video is a really great tool to use, though. All right, second one is research findings around farmed fish. Now, why are we talking about farmed fish? Farmed fish, Wisconsin is a great state for aquaculture in a lot of different ways. We do aquaculture differently here than if we were on the coast, if we were in Maine or we were in Oregon and we were talking about farmed fish. We'd be probably talking open water, pen fish that are, if you've ever seen, particularly in Norway, like a lot of Scandinavian countries have these elaborate decks that go out over fjords that have penned fish in it. Farmed fish in Wisconsin are mostly grown in buildings and what we consider raceways or trackways. That we do have some farms that can grow fish outside in ponds that have been grandfathered in from back when we used to do this in the early part of the 20th century. It is, if you're talking to I'm an aquaculture fan, it is a pretty environmentally friendly way to raise fish. It relieves pressure on our wild fisheries, and it's a great way to get fresh fish here in Wisconsin. And if you're combining your fish with your greens, a great way to get greens grown here year round. So it's a really interesting way to grow fish. We were asked by Sea Grant to help them understand and help the Wisconsin Aquaculture Association understand what they could do to communicate better about farmed fish. Now, if you are a fish farmer in Wisconsin, you are probably selling out all of the fish that you can grow in a year before it ever hits the market. So this tends to be a very small community of fish farmers right now with a very high demand for their product. So we weren't looking at necessarily expanding fish farming yet, but we did really want to know, how are people engaging with this as a topic? What do they think about it? What do they think the benefits are? Because it's a very different way than we conceive of fish as being grown and brought to market, right? We think of it as, you know, somebody out on a trawler or a fishing boat somewhere in the Atlantic catching our salmon, and not necessarily our salmon being raised in Wisconsin and grown in Wisconsin. So we had three, again, we did another survey for this and understood both what farmers were facing that were in aquaculture and what they were interested, but also what are consumers, if they thought about farmed fish at all, what did they think about it? And we found that there were three research-based messages. Again, jobs is a really strong one around agriculture, that Wisconsin farm-raised fish support jobs. Second, Wisconsin farm-raised fish are healthy. We wanted to understand if people will react to that message. And third, Wisconsin farm-raised fish are sustainable from an environmental standpoint. And this is going to look familiar because what we were doing again is driving people to a website. In this case, we weren't driving people to a farm or a CSA website because there were not farms and there are not CSAs when we were running this that had fish that they were able to sell because they were selling out of all of their fish. So we were driving people to the Eat Wisconsin Fish website, which is a website that is run by Sea Grant in Wisconsin. And our goal again is to determine which message was most successful in terms of click-through. We ran the campaign instead of for 2 weeks, we ran it for 13 days, so 1 day short of 2 weeks. We had a bigger budget, so $750 per message test. We had 3 different messages that we test, so $750 instead of $450. So it gets just a little bit more advanced for this one. Our secondary goal, so again, we were looking at the message. Our secondary goal was to drive people to the Eat Wisconsin, and our metrics, the things we were measuring is click-throughs to the website and the lowest cost per click-through. Here's what our ads look like. This varies a little bit than the other one. With the other one, we had the 4 farms, identical messages, different locations across the state. Here we have one image. The image is separate across them, so we have a little bit of variation with the image. And then the second one is, of course, the words really change. The only words that remain the same, Eat Wisconsin Fish on the upper left-hand side, the dates that they were all aired, and then what's on your table tonight was the top headline. We were really hoping people were going to focus on the bigger headline down at the bottom. So Eat Wisconsin, farm-raised fish and support local jobs. Second, farm-raised fish, farm-raised to be healthy and nourishing. And third, fish, farm-raised for sustainable seafood supply. Now, you're looking at this and you're saying, no, wait a minute, Kristen. At the beginning, you said that pictures attract more people than just text, but pictures with people attract more people than just pictures. Fish are not picture or people, although those are really good-looking fish. We did not manage to find a picture of a fish that was clear, that also had a person in it, in which the fish was a species raised in Wisconsin for farming. We had like all of these boxes we were trying to check. So we have a fish face, but not a person face in the last one. Which one of these do you guys think is the best? Wins. Do you guys want to put that in the chat? Healthy, healthy, healthy. First one. Healthy, sustainable, sustainable. Yes, you can get the recording of the webinar. Jobs. Yep. I thought it was going to be healthy because I picked that picture. In part, I thought I'm really good at picking pictures, and this is the one that's going to win. And I thought we've got this little girl who, and we know that if you put babies and puppies, and kitties, any infant or child animal in a picture, it reads as, people perceive this as health and healthy. So I thought that the young girl with healthy and with this beautiful plate of food was going to be the one that won. Do you think I was right? Let's see. Y'all know my track record now. I did not win that one. Jobs. Jobs was the one that won the click-throughs. This was a surprise. We did not think that jobs, given our CSA results, we didn't think that jobs was the real call here. The cost per click-through was, the average for all was 45 cents. We got 4,986 clicks. So you can see how we learned with the first one and we applied it to the second one and we got better in terms of clicks and costs. Our cost per click-through is 34 cents, which still, we were working with a consultant who was giving us, kind of like helping us get up to speed on this. And he's like, 34 cents is okay. But if I gave a 34 cent per click estimate to some of my clients, they'd be really unhappy with that. So it's good for what we did, but if you really, once you really get good at this, like the click cost goes way, way down. Healthy was 56 cents. So I actually lost. I did just not come in first place. I came in third place. So moral of the story, don't let me ever place money for you on a bet. I will lose it. I will lose it. So jobs, healthy and sustainable by click-through. We had a little bit more market data with this than we had with the first set of ads. We had far more click-throughs across all age groups with the jobs claim. Super interesting, huh? You can see though, through this, like which age groups are more interested in farmed fish. Young people, not so interested. As we get a little older, we get a little bit more interested in farmed fish. And the interesting thing is our surveys for this and the CSA, when we sent those out, we sent them out by mail and we asked the primary shopper in each household to fill out both of the surveys that form the basis for this. The people that returned the surveys, the primary shoppers, mail surveys are always returned by people my age, like the typical mail survey returner is in their 50s. And if you ask, or older, nobody else checks their mail apparently anymore. And if you ask for the primary shopper, you're getting far more women than men answering surveys. So the interesting thing about this is knowing who returned the survey and what we were basing our answers on and who purchases the food, right? The primary shopper in your household, if you're in a household with more than one gender, is often the female person who's identifying as female as your primary shopper. Just the way grocery works. But when we look at this, who is more interested in the fish advertisements? People identifying as male. So jobs, men were interested in that jobs ad and the sustainable ad, and men and women were roughly equally interested in the healthy claim. But that jobs one really, really took hold. And that kind of surprised everyone, but it was super interesting as a result. When we looked at, and again, this is more information we had for this than we had for the first one, Facebook really opened up a lot of data. And since we've ran this ad, there's even more data that you can call when you do a Facebook advertising campaign. Most people were accessing the ads on their phones, and that had been a shift. I access Facebook almost exclusively from my laptop, because I'm on my laptop all day long, but I am not the norm for that anymore. Our most effective audience segments were men overall for all ads. Men were just more interested in this ad campaign than women, which was so interesting because women were the ones that turned out the survey. So that's really interesting. When I give this, or when I used to give this presentation at the Aquaculture Association, I would say to the men in the room, I'd say specifically men, please, before the end of the week, talk to the women in your life about farmed fish. So, because why are these messages only being attended to or being attended to more often by one group than the other and not the primary shopper group? So that was really interesting. This is something that we learned. So we intuited this on the first ad campaign that maybe 2 weeks was a little too long, but we didn't have the day-by data for that campaign that we did for this. When we looked at where we're peaking for click-throughs, we launched the campaign on July 9th. We peaked in click-throughs on July 10th. So within 36 hours, we had kind of peaked in terms of what we looked at for click-throughs, although our cost per click-through, as you can see, climbed. So the number of clicks closed. So we decided after this, if we were to do another campaign again, we wouldn't run it for 2 weeks. We'd run it for 3 to 4 days, stop the campaign, take a break, maybe take a 3 to 4 day break, and then run it again. That would be more efficient with our dollars and also probably keep the message a little bit fresher in terms of, so that's one of the things that we learned campaign 1 to campaign 2. When you look at time of day, when you set the ad or when you post is really important. If you are posting on your own every day, if you don't use Hootsuite which is a social media management tool that you can use for free. They've got a free version, which is for most of us all we need. You can schedule your posts there. If you are not using one of those, it literally pays to get up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m., know what you have identified what you're going to say that day, the night before, and hit send on your phone. People, when they're waking up, beginning at like 4:35 in the morning, what do we all do? We used to listen to the radio in the morning. We're reaching for our phones and we're scrolling through to look at the news. So those early morning posts over the day are going to have time to build some momentum. So that's kind of the second or third thing that we learned throughout this campaign. Shorter time periods, higher concentrations in terms of audience. And the third was time of day really does matter. You want to get that message out there early. Also, and I don't think I have day dates on here. Thank you, Jessica, for posting that. I don't have dates of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday tend to be really great days to post unless you have stuff that's going on Thursday, Friday, Saturday that you want people to know about, then post Monday, Tuesday, and again. But Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, people gear up their attention or pay increasing amounts of attention at the end of the week to social media, in part because we know people are using it to schedule their social life. So we want to take advantage of that. So it was most effective for us to use support jobs as the message and to target men 35 or older and to run the campaign for only 3 or 4 days. One of the things that we learned that's not in this report or that we suspected is that particularly because it was July when we were running it, or it was summer months when we were running it, that we were hitting the fishing crowd. So this group really resonated very closely with groups who pay attention to our target, our unintended target or result. Overlaps pretty strongly with men who fish, people who pay attention to aquatic invasive species and aquaculture and all things lakes and fishing and fish. And in our conversation around the post, so there's like a lot of really great stuff from people who are really involved in this community. So that's kind of this community that we knew was out there, that we knew we'd probably attract, but we didn't fully think that they were going to be our primary target audience. It's really cool that that happened. So yeah, again, most respondents were women to the survey, and yet men really like the ads. So I'm looking at the time. I'm going to go through these next things pretty quickly. So we've got another 10 minutes or so to talk. So our implications of what we can do: personify your food business. In addition to those ads, one of the reasons we think that the jobs ad worked better is because it's clearly people in aquaculture, and the folks in the orange outfits, I think, are they in the next one? Oh, I didn't put it on here. I'm sorry to not have that on here. The folks wearing the orange waders are all part of the UW Stevens Point, UW-Madison Aquaculture Research Station up in Bayfield County. So these are all folks that are heavily involved in fish, but clearly they're raising fish. Clearly they're personifying the fish, the farmed fish in that case. So people want the opportunity to connect with you. It's part of what you are offering to people, not just the food that you grow or you make. It is the opportunity to connect with the food that nourishes them. You're nourishing their souls as well as nourishing their bodies. Emphasize your location. So we say 150 miles in our field, but people really feel that's all over the state. Your consumers, the people that you talk with, are going to think of you as a local food, even if you're communicating from Bayfield and they live down in Cudahy. They're still going to perceive that Wisconsin connection and that as local. And that, I think, helps in terms of building markets. Shorter 3 to 4 day bursts for your posts are better than longer campaigns, or at least in our experience, they were. Post early in the day so you can take advantage of those waking hours. And I'm scrolling through my phone at 6 a.m. while I'm trying to figure out which pair of shoes and which jacket I should be wearing today. Follow best practices for posts: consistent, predictable, goal-driven. Include a picture when you can. And again, there's that picture of the folks at the Aquaculture Research Station and really personifying what it means to be a fish farmer or to farm fish. And then I will drop this in. We don't have time for it. We did, because we had a little bit of extra budget in the Sea Grant. We put some videos together online. These have in the 500, they've been up there for 4 years now, 500 views. You can see 197 views for Titus, who's on the left, and 308 views on the other one. Great, really high quality videos. Not used in the same way that they're just out there on YouTube. We're not paying to promote them. But when you look at the power of social media and what you can offer as a resource, there's some really great things to have out there. Last thing, thank you to Sea Grant, and I'm going to put and Sarah and Fair Share and everyone else. And my email again is on here. I'm going to dump it in the links one more time, along with a link to an extension page that has all sorts of great resources that Brett Shaw and Laura Witzling and some of whom I've worked on. Suggestions for hashtags. Hashtag, I would definitely go with whatever food you're producing. So local food, hashtag cheese, hashtag Wisconsin, hashtag driftless. So look, whatever food you're producing, your region. If you're doing recipes, all of anything. Why don't you guys put some of your suggestions for hashtags in there? But definitely your food, your farm, your region, anything else you want to connect with. How much do you need to spend to have an impact? Varies according to what your goal is. There's no hard and fast rule. If there's a hard and fast rule, my hard and fast rule would be spend as little as possible. So I would start by, if you're just getting into this, start by building an organic audience. So make sure that you are on local message boards, promoting your or linking when you can to your product, to your farm, to your events if you have events. Build an organic audience there. Build a community with other people. So let's say you make salsa and you know somebody who grows tomatoes as part of their CSA, and you know somebody else that has a food processing facility. Maybe talk about everybody promoting one another's business. So you're talking about processing your salsa at the food processors and also linking to the tomatoes that you use from the CSA. And they're saying, so excited that Jean is making our salsa at the Langley County food processing facility, and hashtagging and connecting with each other that way. That's going to draw clicks in organically. So always try first to build an organic audience. Second, when you're starting out in advertising, do that. And we're not talking about the nuts and bolts today. I would start with the boost post function, because you can put $10, $15, $5 on the boost post versus a solid advertising campaign first. And that's going to give you an idea of what people are going to respond to. So I'd start with the boost post. And then once you've done and you felt like you've really gotten kind of a rhythm going with the boost post, then maybe look at a little bit of advertising next. But again, just, give yourself permission to experiment at a low cost and organically first before you get into spending. We spent a lot, $450. That's, if I was running my own business, I'd be like, that's a lot of money. $750. Like, I'd really make sure I was comfortable with that before I spent $750 of my own money on it. Don't tell my sponsors that. We knew what we were doing in terms of having research and having some consultants on the side. So we weren't just starting. All right, so we grow grass-fed lamb because the same word for the meat is the same as the baby sheep. There's a major misperception that the meat is from super young lambs. People follow our farm and ask for posted baby lambs during lambing season, but then your face drops in meat sales. What do you recommend? Yeah, so part of what I've researched in the past, I got into researching around food. Do you remember the lean, finely textured beef, pink slime, kerfuffle, I call it, back in 2012? We have a lot of, every one of us, there's a lot of feeling about how our food is grown. And people have a lot of feelings around meat and meat processing. And there's the idea that every cut of meat, and I think we as people in the farm community feel this way too. We take very good care of our animals. They have ideally one bad day. And that's part of the process. That's part of the process. So I would say that if you face a drop in meat sales from showing pictures of lambs during lambing season, I might not do that. I might, that's a really hard question, right? What do you do? I'm interested in if the group collectively has an answer or has experience with this. marketing meat it's a fine line to walk. I think it's probably one of the tougher agricultural products in terms of marketing. Well, show recipes instead. That's great. Yeah. I think that's great. Recipes, cooking, pictures of food, educate on meat types.
Maybe focus on like the grass fed, or, you know, how I like that recipe recommendation, like how the meat tastes better. So like stop focusing so much on the cute animal and focus more on how they are gonna get the product. Maybe it's a box of meat, or, you know, like yeah.
Or pictures of the landscape where you know, if you've got a beautiful green pasture with a fence, or, you know, pretty background, that's like, things like that are great to show. If you've got a picturesque barn, that's great to show. Pictures of, if you've got a, you know, I go back to the tractor pictures. If you are the type that is like, you want to be personified as part of your farm, you know, what does it look like if you're throwing a hay bale, you know, over, or filling a water trough up? I mean, just like interesting pictures of things that are happening that aren't necessarily connecting people in that way. Yeah.
Kristen, do you see have you seen, or has there been research into the use of language and images that might have a nostalgic context? Like the farm was a red, probably 1950s tractor versus a big industrial tractor that we have nowadays for farms. Has there been any research into that nostalgic side versus the reality side?
There has, so actually, yes. So not necessarily the nostalgic side. Brett and Laura did a really nice research piece on how to frame farmers, and it was heroes, jobs. There are 4 different frames for agriculture as a whole. And again, I will send out, it's an academic research paper on the one hand, but also it's pretty easy to read. I'll send out some information of that. I think it comes down to, again, with that, it's just personifying your farm. So nostalgia can happen in a number of different ways. The cute little farm-all tractor, which, you know, is definitely not, if you've got, you know, 400 acres or 200 acres, like that's a hard tractor to use because it's just small. So you probably have bigger machinery. You can personify the bigger machinery. We used to, on my in-laws farm, take a picture every year, everybody in denim and white. They had a blue Ford tractor and the whole family around the blue Ford tractor. And we only did it for 3 or 4 years, but like family members like children were born and people got married. And so it's a bigger tractor because it's the backdrop for this whole family. So even sometimes with like the bigger machinery, the nostalgia is not necessarily the machinery, it's the family on the farm, with the farm in the background and the tractor as the symbol of the farm and the center of the family. My kid's grandfather, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law on the tractor as like the leaders of the family. So that kind of nostalgia really works well. Simple posts, if you're building an organic audience, just of what you're doing every week. If you did not grow up on a farm, or if you grew up on a farm and you're no longer on the farm, knowing that this is the week that corn is going in, or knowing that, you know, this is the week that we're doing the gleaning in the fall. Those are all the shoots coming up, the very first, you know, shoots of the tomato plants, or moving the tomato plants from a greenhouse into the actual farm, all super interesting and great ways to connect with people. Yeah.
One question we had earlier before we all head out, which we welcome you to come to our Feed Summit, which will be in October on the 28th and 29th in Milwaukee. But you had mentioned the community building and the social media. How would you go about building community in the social media? That was the question we had earlier.
I'd say the first way is go to the Feed Summit in October and get to know some people that do things that are identical or similar to what you do in other parts of the state. So if you're building a CSA, right, you do to a certain extent, you're local, and most CSA farmers I know are also working with their neighbors and whatnot. So, you know, connect with your neighbors that are doing the same thing, but then also connect with the people that are across the state and cross-post one another's material. So if you are, if everyone, you know, maybe have a conversation about how can we help one another promote what is some of the things that are working for us. So building community around the work that you're doing, but then talking about that community online. One of the most famous examples of this in southwestern Wisconsin is the Soil Sisters. So all farmers from southwestern Wisconsin that are women that have been featured on television together and in different areas together. So working on building community that way by just connecting with people on social media, cross-posting what you're doing, talking about how is it that we can help one another build a following. And oftentimes it's as simple as tagging the processor's page if you're the producer, if you're the grower, or, you know, so excited that somebody picked up our onions today and is going to be using them to make their homemade spaghetti sauce, and then tagging the restaurant that's using them. All of those things just get more eyeballs on your page and connect with that audience in a way that you want to connect. That was a long answer for just connect with people and repost. Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining us
Yeah.
this afternoon and for the feed webinar. And we'll be having that evaluation. We put it in the chat, and if you could complete that, and we can send out information, as Kristen mentioned before, on some links to the technicalities of how you put together social posts.
Great. Thank you all. And I will also send out in that email a link to the list of extension resources that will help you look more deeply into marketing if you choose to do so. Thank you guys so much for listening today.